The woman in the red-fitted blazer was already shouting when I reached the eastern gate of Broken Spur Ranch. Monica Grant stood beside the steel post with her shoulders pulled back and her face flushed almost as deeply as the fabric she wore. Her eyes were wide and fixed on me, her mouth tense with anger, and one hand kept cutting through the air toward the broken chain hanging from the gate. In her other hand, she gripped a thick HOA folder as though the papers inside gave her authority over every acre behind me. 2 contractor trucks were parked past the gate on my private gravel road. Their tires had pressed dark tracks into the damp surface, and 3 workers were measuring the road between the cottonwood trees my wife and I had planted nearly 18 years earlier. A length of severed chain lay in the weeds. My padlock rested several feet away, its steel body split open by bolt cutters. Near the rear tire of the first truck, I noticed something worse. One of the old survey stakes had been pulled from the ground and tossed into the truck bed with scrap lumber. Monica marched toward me in black pointed toe heels that had no business being on a muddy ranch road. She raised the folder above her shoulder, pointed at the driveway, and insisted that Cedar Ridge Estates possessed a 30-foot access easement through my property. According to her, the HOA had already approved improvements to the road, hired the contractor, and notified the homeowners that the route would soon become an emergency and maintenance entrance for the subdivision. I did not match her volume. I took out my phone and photographed the damaged lock, the cut chain, the trucks, the workers, the license plates, and the survey stake. Then I recorded the fresh tire marks leading past the gate. Monica continued talking as though my silence proved I was intimidated. Her gestures became sharper. She slapped the folder against the hood of one contractor truck and pointed toward my barn, making it clear that she expected the work to continue whether I agreed or not. The contractor, Ben Holloway, looked less certain. He kept glancing from Monica to the private property sign beside the gate. I asked him to remove his crews and equipment until he could show me a recorded document authorizing entry. He did not argue. Monica did enough of that for everyone. What caught my attention was not her anger. It was the first page visible inside her folder. The document carried the words, Access Easement Exhibit, but the recording reference printed near the bottom looked incomplete. I had reviewed enough road plans during my years in county maintenance to recognize how recorded instruments were normally identified. This one had a book number, a page number, and a parcel reference that did not appear to belong together. I photographed that page before Monica pulled the folder against her chest. Then I called the sheriff's non-emergency line, reported the property damage, and told the workers they were no longer permitted to remain on my land. I still did not know whether Monica had misunderstood an old map, relied on bad legal advice, or deliberately pushed ahead without authority. But I knew one thing before the first truck backed through my gate. The paper she was waving did not look like proof. It looked like the beginning of a much larger mistake. I bought Broken Spur Ranch 18 years before Monica Grant appeared at my gate with contractors and a folder full of claims. Back then, the property was 142 acres of tired pasture, leaning fences, an aging barn, and a narrow gravel road that washed out every spring. My wife, Ellen, saw more in it than I did. She stood beside the eastern gate on the afternoon we signed the papers and said the place felt like somewhere a person could finally stop moving. I was 39 then and still working as a road maintenance supervisor for the county. My days were spent inspecting drainage ditches, damaged shoulders, culverts, access routes, and construction records. I was not a surveyor or a lawyer, but I learned that roads were rarely as simple as they looked. A track worn into the ground did not automatically create a public right. A line on a planning map did not always survive into the final recorded documents. The paperwork mattered because ownership, maintenance responsibility, and legal access could change within a few feet. Ellen and I used nearly all our savings for the down payment. We spent the next decade repairing the barn, replacing fence posts, restoring the well, and turning the neglected pasture into a small cattle operation that could support itself. The ranch never made us wealthy. It gave us something steadier than that. It gave us work we understood and a place that belonged to us because we had paid for it, cared for it, and carried its debts through every bad season. The private road entered through the eastern steel gate, followed the lower pasture, and ran almost 3/4 of a mile toward the barn. Ellen planted cottonwood saplings along its western shoulder during our second year on the property. Most were thin enough to bend in one hand when she put them into the ground. By the time Monica's contractors arrived, those trees stood above the power lines and cast long bands of shade across the gravel every afternoon. After Ellen died from cancer, the road became one of the parts of the ranch I guarded most carefully. Every stretch of it held some reminder of the life we had built. There was the low spot where her old pickup once became stuck during a thunderstorm, the widened turn near the barn where our daughter learned to reverse a horse trailer, and the small stone marker beside the third cottonwood where Ellen used to leave a bucket while watering the young trees. The gate was not there for decoration. Behind it were cattle, fuel tanks, farm equipment, irrigation lines, and sections of pasture where an open entrance could cause serious problems. Delivery drivers called before entering. Veterinarians had the code when an animal needed treatment. My daughter had her own key. Nobody else had an unrestricted right to pass through. Cedar Ridge Estates did not exist when we bought the ranch. The subdivision appeared 12 years later on land bordering my eastern fence. At first, the development caused few problems. Its main entrance connected directly to a county road, and a landscaped buffer separated the nearest houses from my pasture. Most residents understood that the ranch had been there first. During a grass fire 3 summers earlier, emergency crews had asked to cross my property because smoke had blocked part of the subdivision entrance. I opened the gate and guided 2 fire engines along the gravel road. It was a temporary decision made during an emergency, not an agreement giving the HOA permanent use. No payment changed hands, no document was signed, and nobody suggested that the favor altered my deed. Monica became HOA president the following year. She was organized, forceful, and skilled at convincing homeowners that every problem required immediate board action. Traffic near the Cedar Ridge entrance had increased, landscaping trucks often blocked the narrow turn, and residents complained that emergency access depended on a single road. From Monica's perspective, my ranch road offered a convenient answer. It connected the rear edge of the subdivision to another county route without requiring the HOA to purchase new land. Her first email had sounded professional. She asked whether I would consider granting Cedar Ridge a limited emergency easement. A second message proposed regular access for maintenance vehicles. The third mentioned compensation, but the amount would not have covered even a year of road repairs, much less the loss of privacy and control. I declined every proposal in writing. That history mattered because Monica later acted as if the HOA had never needed my permission. She did not discover a forgotten right hidden in an old deed. She had tried to buy access, failed, and then returned with a different version of the story. As you listen, consider what you would have done in my position. Would one emergency favor justify turning a private ranch road into a permanent neighborhood entrance? Leave your view in the comments, because the answer Monica chose would eventually cost her board far more than the easement she had once tried to purchase. The night after I found the broken lock, I searched my archived emails and opened Monica's original proposal. Attached to it was a map showing the access route in yellow. In the corner, beside the line leading through my gate, someone had added a note that Monica's courtroom folder did not contain. The route was marked, subject to acquisition. The words, subject to acquisition, changed the way I looked at everything Monica had brought to my gate. They did not prove fraud by themselves, but they proved that the HOA had once understood a basic fact: the route through Broken Spur Ranch did not already belong to Cedar Ridge Estates. Somebody had known permission was still required. I saved the email, printed the attachment, and placed both beside the photographs from the gate. By midnight, I had created a folder containing the broken lock, the severed chain, the contractor vehicles, the uprooted survey stake, and Monica's original request to purchase access. I also wrote down the time each truck entered and left. Years of county maintenance work had taught me that memory became less reliable every time a dispute grew more emotional. A dated record did not. The next morning, I replaced the damaged chain with a heavier one and installed a new commercial padlock. I also mounted another camera beneath the eave of an equipment shed overlooking the lower section of the road. The camera at the gate showed who entered, but the new angle would show where they went after passing through. Ben Holloway's crew did not return that day. Monica's response arrived instead. A certified envelope from Cedar Ridge Estates HOA appeared in my mailbox 2 days later. The notice described my locked gate as an unlawful obstruction of a recorded emergency access easement. It demanded that I restore entry within 48 hours and warned that the HOA intended to recover contractor standby charges, administrative expenses, and any legal costs caused by my refusal. The notice cited an exhibit but did not include a complete recorded instrument. It repeated the same book and page numbers I had seen inside Monica's folder. Those numbers still looked wrong. One referred to a utility filing. Another appeared to belong to the subdivision plat. Neither one clearly described an easement across my parcel. I responded in writing. I stated that the gate, road, and adjoining pasture were private property under my deed. I asked the HOA to identify the exact document granting Cedar Ridge access, provide the county recording number, and suspend all entry until ownership and access rights were verified. I sent the letter by certified mail and email, then posted a copy beside the gate in a weatherproof sleeve. Monica did not provide the requested document. Instead, she sent a longer packet containing board meeting minutes, an enlarged planning map, and a page labeled Access Easement Exhibit A. The minutes showed that the board had approved improvements to an emergency route along the western edge of Cedar Ridge. The vote may have authorized Monica to spend HOA money, but it could not transfer rights over land the HOA did not own. The map showed a line reaching my road, but the line was thin, yellow, and disconnected from any complete legal description. The packet also included an invoice from Ben Holloway's company for mobilization and delay. Monica had copied me on an email claiming those charges would be added to the damages the HOA intended to pursue. The message was designed to make the problem feel expensive before I had even hired a lawyer. Monica was counting on pressure. She had more than 100 homeowners behind her, a board budget, and a management company that sent official-looking letters. I had cattle to feed, fences to repair, and no interest in spending my savings inside a courtroom. That calculation might have worked if she had stopped there. 3 mornings later, the gate camera sent an alert to my phone while I was checking a water trough near the north pasture. A white utility truck had stopped outside the locked gate. Behind it was a flatbed carrying lumber, metal posts, and a large rectangular sign. By the time I reached the eastern road, 2 workers were setting the sign beside my fence. It read, Cedar Ridge Emergency Access, in reflective lettering. They had not crossed the locked gate, but they had dug post holes on the narrow strip of my property between the gravel shoulder and the fence line. I photographed the work and asked to see their authorization. One worker showed me a printed instruction sheet bearing the HOA logo and Monica's signature. The document directed the crew to install access signage and prepare the roadside for gravel improvements. The workers stopped when I showed them my deed map and informed them that the location was disputed private property. They called Ben, loaded their tools, and left the unfinished holes behind. The sign remained on the flatbed. That afternoon, however, a dump truck arrived from the opposite direction. The driver accessed the rear edge of Cedar Ridge through the subdivision and released several tons of gravel near the point where the HOA's proposed route met my fence. Most of the load fell on HOA land, but part of it spilled across the marked boundary and covered a drainage swale I maintained to keep stormwater away from the lower pasture. The camera on the equipment shed captured the truck, the company name, and the exact time the gravel was dumped. I also photographed the buried swale and placed temporary stakes around the spill. Monica later described the gravel as routine maintenance to an existing access route. There had never been a maintained route at that location. There had been grass, a drainage channel, and my fence. I sent another notice revoking any temporary permission the HOA might claim from the grass fire emergency 3 years earlier. I stated that no HOA vehicle, resident, contractor, or agent had permission to enter Broken Spur Ranch. I also warned that the disturbed drainage area needed to be restored before the next major rain. The next storm arrived before the HOA responded. Rain began before dawn and continued through most of the morning. By 9, water was moving down the hillsides and gathering along the eastern boundary. Because the gravel had partially blocked the drainage swale, runoff spread across the shoulder of my private road and softened the surface near the gate. At 10:17, the gate camera recorded a landscaping truck entering behind a Cedar Ridge maintenance vehicle. The chain was no longer secured around the steel post. Somebody had removed the clevis pin from the gate hinge assembly and swung the entire gate inward without cutting the new lock. 3 more landscaping vehicles followed. Their drivers used my road to avoid standing water near the main Cedar Ridge entrance. Heavy tires pushed through the softened gravel, carving ruts several inches deep. One truck accelerated near the lower pasture and startled a group of yearling cattle gathered beside the fence. The animals broke toward the barn, forcing me to abandon the road and move them away from an open equipment area. By the time I returned, the vehicles were gone. The road was not. Deep tracks ran from the eastern gate to the first bend. Mud covered the shoulder where Ellen's cottonwood stood. One young cow had scraped its hind leg against a fence brace during the panic, and a section of irrigation pipe had been crushed where a truck left the gravel. The cameras had captured all of it. They showed the maintenance vehicle stopping at the gate. They showed a man removing the hinge pin. They showed the landscaping convoy entering my property. The second camera showed the trucks passing the barn road, and its audio recorded engines accelerating near the cattle. Monica emailed me that evening. She claimed Cedar Ridge had exercised an existing emergency access right because stormwater had made the subdivision entrance temporarily unsafe. She also stated that the HOA would not accept responsibility for damage on a route it believed it was legally entitled to use. Her confidence no longer surprised me. What surprised me was the attachment. It was a PDF copy of the document she called the recorded easement. I downloaded the file, preserved the original email, and checked the document properties before printing it. The visible page looked aged and had a faded county stamp near the top, but the embedded file information told a different story. The PDF had been created 3 months earlier. That was nearly 15 years after the subdivision plat had supposedly granted Cedar Ridge permanent access through my ranch. The PDF creation date did not prove that the underlying document was false. A legitimate county record could have been scanned recently, renamed, or converted into a new file. I understood that much. What mattered was whether the image inside the PDF matched a document that had actually been recorded against my property. I preserved the original attachment instead of working from a printed copy. I saved Monica's email in its native format, created 2 backup copies, and recorded the date, time, file name, and metadata in the timeline I had started after the lock was cut. Then I reviewed every camera clip from the first contractor visit through the storm day convoy. I labeled each file by date and location, copied the footage to an external drive, and stored another copy away from the ranch. The evidence was beginning to form a pattern, but it still needed context. A video could show a truck entering my road. It could not establish the legal boundary by itself. An email could show what Monica claimed. It could not determine what rights the HOA actually possessed. For that, I needed the recorded history of both properties. I started with the closing file from when Ellen and I purchased the ranch. The deed described the 142-acre parcel through a series of bearings, distances, and monument references. The title policy listed several exceptions, including utility rights, a drainage agreement near the western field, and an old agricultural access arrangement that affected a different portion of the ranch. Nothing in the policy granted Cedar Ridge Estates access through the eastern gate. The original survey showed the same thing. The private road sat entirely inside our parcel, curving away from the eastern boundary before continuing toward the barn. The nearest recorded easement crossed farther north and served an electrical transmission line. It did not follow the road, reach the subdivision, or authorize general vehicle traffic. I took the deed, survey, title policy, Monica's PDF, and the yellow access map to the county recorder's office. I requested the complete index for my parcel and the adjoining Cedar Ridge development. The clerk helped me locate the recorded subdivision plat, amendments, utility documents, road dedications, and property transfers associated with the development. The book and page numbers Monica had cited did exist, but they did not create the right she claimed. One number led to the final Cedar Ridge subdivision plat. Another led to the electrical utility easement that crossed near the ranch boundary. The parcel reference printed on her exhibit pointed to a strip of land owned by the utility company, not to my gravel road. The final subdivision plat included an emergency access concept inside Cedar Ridge, but the line stopped at the subdivision boundary. It did not continue through Broken Spur Ranch. A note directed the developer to obtain any off-site rights separately before constructing an external connection. That requirement matched the language I had found in Monica's earlier proposal. The route had always been subject to acquisition. The clerk also located a preliminary development plan filed during the county review process. That drawing contained the yellow line Monica had enlarged and shown to the board. It passed through the area where my road was located, but the document was marked as preliminary and carried a notation stating that off-site access depended on owner approval. It was a planning concept, not a transfer of property rights. I ordered certified copies of the relevant records. Before leaving, I asked whether the page Monica called Access Easement Exhibit A appeared anywhere in the index. The clerk searched by document number, title, developer name, subdivision name, and parcel reference. Nothing matched it. That did not automatically mean the page had been invented. It could have been an unrecorded draft, an attachment removed from another filing, or a document prepared for a transaction that never closed. But an unrecorded proposal was not the same thing as a recorded easement binding my land. The boundary still needed to be physically confirmed. I contacted Daniel Ruiz, a licensed surveyor who had worked on agricultural parcels throughout the county for more than 20 years. I gave him the deed, the original survey, and the certified records, but I did not ask him to prove my conclusion. I asked him to locate the boundary independently. Daniel spent 2 days reviewing monument records before bringing his crew to the ranch. They recovered an iron pin near the southern corner, a capped rod beside the utility corridor, and 2 older reference points tied to the original parcel description. They used those monuments with modern survey equipment to retrace the deed line. Monica arrived during the second afternoon. Her red blazer was visible beyond the pasture before she reached us. She crossed the uneven ground in black heels, gripping her HOA folder against her side. Her expression tightened when she saw the orange stakes Daniel's crew had placed near the eastern boundary. She moved quickly toward the equipment and began gesturing at the subdivision map she carried. Daniel did not argue with her. He explained that he had been retained to retrace a recorded deed and would issue his conclusions only after checking the field measurements against the county documents. Monica's certainty had no effect on the instrument, the monuments, or the calculations. The preliminary stake line placed the steel gate, the drainage swale, and the entire traveled portion of the ranch road inside my property. In several areas, the road sat more than 40 feet from the subdivision boundary. The gravel dumped after the attempted sign installation crossed onto my parcel, but Cedar Ridge's supposed 30-foot access corridor did not appear on any recorded document Daniel had examined. When Monica left, she carried the folder more tightly than before. Her anger had not disappeared, but something in her posture had changed. For the first time, she had seen a professional place physical markers in the ground that did not follow the line on her map. Daniel's final survey arrived 9 days later. It confirmed the boundary and included an overlay comparing the deed line, the utility easement, the final subdivision plat, and the preliminary access proposal. The 4 lines were visibly different. The HOA had treated them as though they described the same right. I then hired Sarah Whitmore, an attorney with experience in rural property and easement disputes. She reviewed the survey, county records, footage, letters, and damage estimates. The road repair company calculated that restoring the ruts, drainage swale, and crushed shoulder would cost more than $11,000. Replacement of the gate hardware, damaged irrigation pipe, and survey monument added several thousand more. Sarah sent the HOA and Ben Holloway's company a formal cease and desist notice. It demanded that they stop entering the ranch, preserve all communications and work orders, identify the exact instrument they relied upon, and disclose any insurance policies that might cover the damage. It also warned them not to remove stakes, alter the road, or destroy electronic records. The HOA's attorney responded with a request for additional time. 2 weeks later, the board produced another package of documents. Most were copies of material we already possessed. One item was different. It was an email written 14 months before Monica cut my lock. The sender was the HOA's previous attorney. The message reviewed the preliminary plan, the utility easement, and the emergency access used during the grass fire. Its conclusion was careful but unmistakable. Cedar Ridge did not possess a recorded right to use Broken Spur Ranch. The attorney had recommended negotiating a purchase before any construction, signage, or regular vehicle access occurred. Monica had received the warning, forwarded it to 2 board members, and later approved Ben's work anyway. The dispute was no longer about whether Monica had misunderstood an old map. The records showed that she had been told exactly what the map did not give her. Sarah read the former HOA attorney's email twice before placing it beside Daniel's survey overlay. The 2 documents came from different sources, but together they exposed the same problem. Cedar Ridge had never acquired a recorded easement through Broken Spur Ranch, and Monica had been warned of that fact more than a year before she ordered Ben Holloway's crew to enter my property. The HOA had tried to create one right out of 3 unrelated pieces of paper. The first was the preliminary subdivision plan. It showed a proposed connection between Cedar Ridge and the road inside my ranch, but the route was marked as dependent on future acquisition. The drawing had been used during the planning process to show what the developer hoped to build. It did not prove that the developer had purchased the necessary land rights, and it did not transfer any interest in my property. The second document was the utility easement. That recorded instrument allowed an electrical company to reach its lines along a narrow corridor near the eastern boundary. It did not name the HOA. It did not permit residents, landscapers, contractors, or maintenance vehicles to travel on my road. It did not authorize gravel work, signs, road expansion, or emergency access for the subdivision. The third piece was the grass fire incident. I had opened the gate because firefighters needed a safer route through heavy smoke. That single act had been temporary, voluntary, and limited to an emergency. It did not give Cedar Ridge permanent control of the road any more than allowing an ambulance across a driveway would transfer ownership of the driveway. Monica's folder blended those 3 facts into one confident claim. The yellow line from the preliminary map made the route look official. The recording information from the utility document made the exhibit look legally filed. The history of emergency use made the story sound practical. But none of those elements created a valid easement across my parcel. The page called Access Easement Exhibit A was not a recorded grant. Sarah traced its formatting to a draft attachment created during the developer's early negotiations. It had been prepared for a possible transaction that was never completed. The faded stamp visible in Monica's PDF had come from the subdivision plat page placed behind it during scanning. When the document was copied and converted, the images overlapped enough to make the exhibit appear officially recorded. That explained the recent PDF creation date. Someone had assembled the packet 3 months before the lock was cut, using older pages that did not belong together. Sarah was careful about what that meant. She did not accuse Monica of forging a deed or altering a county record without more evidence. The assembled file might have been created by a management employee who misunderstood the documents. It might have been prepared for an internal presentation and later treated as authoritative. But Monica had received legal advice stating that no easement existed, and she had continued telling contractors and homeowners that the route was recorded. That difference mattered. A mistake could explain the first email. It could not easily explain the broken lock, the repeated entries, the gravel dumped across the boundary, the removed gate hinge, the disturbed survey marker, or the refusal to stop after I supplied the deed and requested the recording number. Ben Holloway's records made the timeline even clearer. His insurer required him to preserve work orders, GPS logs, invoices, and communications after Sarah sent the cease and desist notice. The company's vehicle data showed exactly when each truck crossed the eastern gate and how far it traveled inside my parcel. The Storm Day convoy had gone nearly half a mile beyond the subdivision boundary. His work orders identified Cedar Ridge Estates HOA as the client. One instruction directed his crew to remove obstructions from the access route. Another authorized workers to reposition the gate if the owner refused to provide a key. Monica's name appeared beneath both approvals. Ben had asked the property management company for proof of access before mobilizing his crew. He received Monica's assembled packet and an assurance that the HOA's attorney had reviewed the matter. The former attorney's email showed the opposite. The uprooted survey stake also became more significant. The first camera angle did not show who removed it, but a worker's phone photographs included in the insurance file showed the stake standing near the gate when the crew arrived. A later photograph showed it lying beside the truck after Monica directed the crew to clear the roadside. The evidence did not establish that Monica personally pulled it from the ground, but it tied the disturbance to the work she authorized. Sarah organized the case around conduct that could be proven without exaggeration. The deed and survey supported my ownership. The county index showed no recorded HOA easement. The preliminary plan showed that acquisition had been required. The former attorney's email showed that Monica knew the right had not been obtained. The camera footage and GPS logs documented continued entry after written notice. The repair estimates established measurable damage. The goal was not to turn every disagreement into a criminal accusation. It was to show a court that Cedar Ridge had no reliable property right, had continued using the road after being warned, and was likely to cause further damage unless ordered to stop. Sarah filed a civil complaint seeking a declaration of the parties' rights, compensation for property damage, recovery of survey and restoration costs, and an injunction preventing further entry. At the same time, she requested temporary relief while the case moved forward. Without it, Monica could continue presenting the road to homeowners as an established HOA access route. The filing included Daniel's certified survey, the county records, photographs of the broken lock and gravel spill, selected camera images, the old acquisition proposal, and the legal warning Monica had received. It did not rely on the PDF metadata alone. The strongest evidence came from records that existed long before the dispute. The HOA answered by claiming the route had always been intended for emergency use and that my earlier cooperation showed acceptance. Sarah responded that intention was not ownership, and temporary permission was not a permanent transfer of land rights. Then she requested the board's internal minutes and communications concerning the access project. The HOA initially produced routine meeting summaries with little detail. Several references pointed to executive sessions whose notes had not been included. Sarah demanded the complete records relevant to the decision to open my road, including any discussion of the former attorney's warning. A week before the injunction hearing, Cedar Ridge turned over the missing minutes. They showed that Monica had presented the board with two choices 14 months earlier. The HOA could negotiate with me and pay for a properly recorded easement, or it could begin using the route and argue later that access had always been implied by the original subdivision plan. The board had never formally approved the second choice. Monica had moved forward anyway. The county grading inspector arrived at Broken Spur Ranch 3 days before the injunction hearing. He did not come to decide who owned the road. His job was narrower. He examined the gravel dumped near the boundary, the blocked drainage swale, the disturbed shoulder, and the work orders Ben Holloway's company had submitted. The inspector confirmed that Cedar Ridge had not obtained approval for grading or drainage changes outside the subdivision parcel. He photographed the runoff damage, marked the affected area, and issued a stop work notice covering any further road construction near my eastern boundary. Ben's crew was also instructed not to remove gravel or alter the site until the ownership dispute and drainage damage were documented. A sheriff's deputy met us later that afternoon. He reviewed the broken lock photographs, the camera footage, and my certified notices withdrawing permission to enter the ranch. He made no declaration about the easement. He recorded the damaged gate, the removed hinge pin, the disturbed survey marker, and the repeated entries after written notice. His report gave Sarah an independent timeline without pretending that law enforcement could settle a civil boundary dispute. At the courthouse, Monica wore the same red-fitted blazer she had worn at my gate. She sat behind the HOA's attorney with her shoulders rigid and her folder closed on the table. The confidence in her face weakened as Sarah arranged the certified deed, Daniel's survey, the county plat, and the former HOA attorney's warning in front of the judge. The HOA argued that the route had been intended as emergency access from the beginning and that my decision to admit fire engines demonstrated a history of shared use. Sarah did not dispute the emergency crossing. She showed that the fire department had entered with my express permission during a single crisis. There was no deed, recorded easement, purchase agreement, or final plat granting Cedar Ridge permanent access. Daniel explained how he retraced the boundary from recorded monuments and deed descriptions. His overlay showed that the utility easement, the preliminary access line, and my private road occupied different locations. The judge then asked the HOA's attorney to identify the instrument that transferred access rights across Broken Spur Ranch. He could not produce one. The internal minutes made the situation worse. They showed that Monica knew negotiation and purchase were required, yet she had authorized contractors to treat the route as existing HOA property. The work orders, GPS logs, and camera footage showed that the conduct continued even after I demanded proof and revoked permission. The judge did not decide the entire case that morning. Instead, the court issued a temporary injunction. Cedar Ridge Estates, its contractors, and its residents were prohibited from using or altering my road while the lawsuit continued. The HOA had to remove its access sign, stop all work, and preserve every relevant document and electronic communication. Outside the courtroom, Monica held the red folder tightly against her chest. She no longer pointed at me or spoke about a 30-foot easement. Behind her, several Cedar Ridge homeowners were already asking how much the dispute had cost and why the board had never been told about the earlier legal warning. The road was quiet again, but the most expensive part of Monica's decision had only begun. The temporary injunction changed the dispute more quickly than any argument at the gate ever could. Cedar Ridge could no longer use my road while claiming the legal issues would be sorted out later. Every vehicle had to return to the subdivision's main entrance, and every homeowner now knew that the board had spent association money on a route it did not control. The HOA's insurance carrier reviewed the work orders, Monica's emails, the former attorney's warning, and the minutes that had never been presented to the full board. Ben Holloway's insurer examined the GPS logs and the property damage caused by his crews. Once both companies understood how much evidence had been preserved, the discussion shifted from denying responsibility to calculating the cost of ending the case. The final settlement was reached several months later. Cedar Ridge formally acknowledged that it possessed no recorded easement across Broken Spur Ranch. A permanent injunction prohibited the HOA, its contractors, and its residents from using the eastern gate or private road without my written permission. The agreement was recorded with the county so that a future board could not revive the same claim using the same preliminary map. The HOA and the contractor's insurer paid a combined settlement of $86,500. That amount covered restoration of the damaged road and drainage swale, replacement of the gate assembly, repairs to the irrigation line, Daniel's survey expenses, and a substantial portion of my legal costs. The remaining gravel was removed under supervision, the disturbed survey marker was reset, and the unauthorized sign location was restored. Cedar Ridge also had to redesign its emergency access plan entirely within land owned by the subdivision. The new project required a proper turnaround, drainage review, permits, and an agreement with the county. It cost far more than Monica's original proposal to purchase a limited easement from me. Homeowners received a financial report showing how the dispute had developed. They also learned that Monica had been warned about the missing easement before she authorized the first contractor visit. Support for her collapsed. She resigned as HOA president before the board could complete a removal vote, leaving the red folder and the access project to people who had never approved her decision. I replaced the broken gate with a stronger steel assembly and rehung the private property sign beside it. Daniel's new survey caps remained visible along the boundary. The cottonwood survived the trucks, the drainage swale carried the next storm away from the road, and the ranch slowly returned to the quiet routine Ellen and I had built there. I did not win because I shouted louder than Monica. I won because I photographed the damage, preserved the files, checked the deed, hired qualified professionals, and allowed the recorded documents to speak for me. A line drawn on a planning map can suggest what somebody wants. It cannot transfer land that was never purchased. When someone acts as though confidence is the same as authority, the safest response is often patience, documentation, and the right evidence. Share your thoughts in the comments, pass this story to someone dealing with a property dispute, save the video for later, and subscribe for more HOA drama and property rights stories where the truth is decided by records rather than volume.